Congressman Brady, the Congress has departed town, or is departing town as we speak, and there was no vote on tax cuts. Is that a gift to Republicans? Is that an election gift to Republicans?
It certainly isn't a gift for, I think, most families and businesses. We're waiting for some clarity on where taxes are going to go. I think they call it the tax bomb that will go off almost $4 trillion at the beginning of next year really has a lot of families, a lot of small businesses concerned. And I don't understand how Congress could go home without providing that clarity. One, it's bad for the economy. Clearly, consumer confidence is way down. I mean, in fact, went down further this week. It's at an 18-month low. It's lower now than before the stimulus. So families are concerned. Businesses are holding on to $2 trillion of cash. They lack clarity. So for Congress to go home is really unforgivable. But I think what it tells us two things is that I think this Congress intends to raise taxes. They just don't want to do it before the election. And secondly, I think at a time when voters are looking for more accountability, tell us where you stand, they've done just the opposite. So I think it's a big disconnect. It's a mistake.
So is clarity as important as policy in this case? I mean,
no, you have to do them both. I think you have to do both of them right. I think clarity would help dramatically with our economy. I think getting the policy right, which is to not raise taxes on any class of citizens or small businesses, I think during a recession, frankly, or any time, just isn't a good idea. So you've got to get the policy, and we should have done it much earlier.
Well, yesterday on this program, we had a fellow member of your Ways and Means Committee, Bill Pascrell, a Democrat of New Jersey, on. Here's what he had to say about voting on taxes and tax increases and defining the middle class.
Right.
250,000, I think, is a good figure. That's middle class. We need to extend also for 5 years the capital gains, long-term capital gains taxes. I think that's important. I think it's a big kick for small business. And the other thing is the dividends, qualified dividends for senior citizens. I mean, they're going to spend the money. This is what we need to, in some way, excite the economy. And then the real compromise was 1 year extension, bring the income up to $500,000. If I had to do that in order to get the votes, I would do that.
Kevin Brady, is there room for compromise in your view?
I think the compromise ought to be on how we get this economy back on track. And I just can't see how you jumpstart the economy by heaping higher taxes on the professionals and the small businesses most likely able to move us out of this recession. Families in those tax brackets have an outsized impact on consumer demand, and the job creators of small businesses, about 60% of small business income will be captured, a little more, by these tax increases, are where most of our jobs are created, or at least a good number of our jobs are created. So from an economic standpoint, it's bad policy, and even worse given the high levels of uncertainty.
Kevin Brady is our guest. He's a Republican from Texas and a member of the Ways and Means Committee. 202 is the area code for all of our numbers. 737-0002 for Democrats, 737-0001 for Republicans, and 628-0205 for all others. We'll begin taking your calls in just a minute. You can also send us a tweet at twitter.com/cspanwj if you want to send in a tweet. Mr. Brady, you have what is called the Federal Sunset Act proposal. What is that?
It's an effort to put our government on a diet. It's not a dramatic diet. It's more of a take off pounds sensibly. What it does is it's modeled after 24 states that put an expiration date on every federal program and agency where periodically they have to justify their existence or face elimination. And what it does is it forces agencies to start treating taxpayers as customers because they're graded on how good a job they're doing, how effective they are. And what it does is it eliminates obsolete agencies and programs that have outlived their usefulness and ends duplication. We know at the federal level We've got almost 500 separate urban aid programs, 340 different economic development programs, 140 separate job training programs. You can't convince me. They're all doing a great job, and they're not duplicating each other. So this sets up a bipartisan commission, equal commission, to examine those agencies. And what happens is that if Congress doesn't act, they face expiration. You really do put an expiration date on them. And it forces Congress both to listen to taxpayers and really delve deeply in how to trim the budget. So I think it's a good bipartisan way to do this.
Well, how do you get real budget cuts, though, if we're not talking about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security? What percentage of the budget do they take up now? 75, 80%?
In a growing number of it. So there's no question we're going to have to find a way both to preserve Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, but also make them sustainable. It's going to be difficult to do. The good news is I think there's some good ideas out there on Social Security. Medicare is now getting the attention it deserves. States have been struggling with Medicaid. They've been raising this red flag now for years because that's just taking over their state budgets. On the other programs, I think we ought not avoid identifying savings in any program in America, because over time it adds up, and the sooner you're able to eliminate that duplication, the more savings it is. So I don't think we can leave a stone unturned.
Well, saying that and doing that are, as you know, different things, and the Republicans were in control from 94 to 2006. What do you tell the voters today if you want to have the Republicans in majority?
Well, if you're looking for a change in the course of the direction of this country, I think Republicans, through our pledge, have offered that. Taking tax increases off the table, getting the spending under control, actually reforming Congress so that these bills do have time to be read and the public to examine them, that one bill, one issue, they have a constitutional basis. I think a lot of what we're proposing are mistakes we made as a party the last time we had the privilege of governing. Republicans spent too much. Now, we balanced the budget 4 years in a row, lowered the deficit, got the economy back on track, reformed welfare, lowered taxes, all good things. But that was overshadowed by the spending in the last years. And the good news is Republicans cut that deficit down to only about $160 billion. That's still a lot of money, Peter, no question. But now the deficit is almost 9 times greater than that. So we were making great strides. That obviously, with all the new debt and deficits, has changed.
What about defense spending?
Well, I think everything has to be on the table. I'm convinced we waste money throughout this government in every corner. And we ought not, as strong as on defense as Republicans are, we waste money. And so we're going to have to be tough across the board. I think voters are looking for truth tellers on the entitlements, on spending, on the debt crisis we will face as a country. Republicans are going to bring those issues to the fore.
Clint, Conway, South Carolina, Republican line. You're first up with Kevin Brady. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you for taking my call. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys, and I appreciate C-SPAN and what they do, bringing it to the public. But my comment is this. I am a Republican, and I agree with the Republican platform on most issues, but I don't think most Americans are as concerned about the taxing that goes on them as much as they are concerned about how the money is being spent.
Yeah.
I mean, what we've seen with this, with this bailout is just stupid spending, and I don't think we can afford it anymore, and I think that's the main concern on the public's mind.
Well, one of the parts of the pledge is to freeze all unspent TARP and stimulus funding.
Yeah, and it's to end the bailouts, to give the money back so we don't make the problem grow larger. But what Clinton said really is true, and I think what's frustrating is the government, through TARP, the stimulus, huge record deficits and spending, has spent without really the American public supporting it. A new health care plan adds trillions of new dollars without the public supporting it. Now that the government's run up huge deficits, they turn to the public and say, oh, by the way, you need to be responsible and pay this back. And the truth is, unless government, I don't think taxpayers ought to tighten their belts unless Washington tightens their belt. And so I agree the way we spend money, so wasteful, undermines confidence in the country.
Bill, Democrat in Lynn, Massachusetts. Please go ahead with your question for Representative Brady.
Hi, good morning, C-SPAN. Thank you for taking my call. I have a couple of questions. One is, I'm a C-SPAN junkie, and I watch C-SPAN all the time, the Senate. And a few months ago, the Republicans put up a proposal for a bill that everybody agreed with, including the president. And when it came time for the vote, the Republicans voted down their own bill, and I can't understand that. That's one comment. And the other is, how can you defend keeping the tax rate for the rich at where it is and cause a large amount of deficit to go towards the deficit you people are always complaining about? And thank you for answering my calls.
Well, thank you, one, for the call in. And I don't know what bill you were talking about specifically, but sometimes good bills get put into some very bad major bills, and you're forced to vote against things you support because, for example, there are major tax increases or massive wasteful spending, and so sometimes that happens. But I'll tell you, one of the premises I guess I question is that heaping new taxes on professionals and small businesses who play a critical role in our economic recovery isn't very smart if we're trying to get this economy back on track. But I also question the premise that that this money, this tax increases, will be used to reduce the debt. So far, look at the track record of this Democratic Congress and White House. They've raised almost $700 billion of new taxes. Did any of it go to debt reduction? The answer is no. In fact, for every $1 they raised, they spent $2. It went to new spending. And I think everyone understands that if Democrats are successful in raising taxes, it won't be going to pay down this debt. It'll be going to expand government, sustain an ever larger government. And I do heed the warning of the president's own White House economic advisor, Christina Romer. She and her husband wrote a piece in one of the key economic magazines in June that said for every 1% increase in tax rates, or tax revenue, you see a 2.5% decline in the economy. So you have more unemployment and fewer jobs by raising taxes. This is the president's own economic advisor telling us that. Maybe that's why there are a growing number of Democrats in Congress who want to vote today, like Republicans, on the tax rates because they oppose these new tax increases, both among the professionals and small businesses and for capital gains and dividends. That's the bipartisan compromise. Don't raise taxes.
Donna wants to know, and she's tweeting in, what exactly are the Republicans going to do different this time if they get into office?
An awful lot. Both dramatically different from Democrats, but also different from how Republicans governed in the past. I say from the Democrats because jobs and spending are the first and second issues on most American minds. We're going to get the economy back on track by taking these tax increases off the table, helping small businesses hire workers. We're going to tackle these dangerous debts and deficits by repealing the bailouts and the stimulus, by going back to the pre-bailout and pre-stimulus levels for starters, by cutting wasteful spending, and we're also going to reform government, both by repealing Obamacare, replacing it with some common sense reforms, but also making sure that all the frustration voters have, that these bills aren't being read, that there are dozens of them put together so it's impossible to know how your lawmaker votes, that there's no constitutional basis. Connecting Congress back to the Constitution perhaps will be the biggest change in governance under Republicans.
Baltimore, Lewis, Independent Line, good morning to you. Lewis, you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have two questions for the representative. One is he had mentioned that the tax cuts for the wealthy, if they expire, that it would affect the economy. But we have had these tax cuts in effect since 2001. And if the tax cuts work so well, why are we in such an economic distress now? what I see in the Wall Street Journal is that these tax cuts have been used to buy 500-foot yachts. This guy in Russia has one. The Sultan of Dubai has one, and they're competing for the length of their yacht. There's another guy from Indiana buying a $50 million yacht. And the chairman of China says that it costs $4 to make an iPod, and we charge $300. I think the problem is the excessive profits, and I think it's by time those who make profits, I don't deny anyone profits because I love profits, but I think it's time that the people of America know that we need to share in some of these excessive profits. Why does an iPod have to cost $2.99? Why can't it cost $199 and put the other $100 in the Social Security Trust?
Well, a couple thoughts. One, on your first point, the tax cuts under President Bush did spur the economy. In fact, the average unemployment rate under President Bush's tenure was in 5.5% roughly. Under President Obama, it's 9.7%. So clearly they were helpful in getting the economy back on track, both from the recession. It helped us rebound from the attacks of 9/11. The financial crisis, I think, has been devastating. The president has been trying to deal with that. I just think his policies are dead wrong. Secondly, you're talking not about billionaires in overseas. You're talking about professionals here in America, who stayed in college to get that advanced degree, who've launched their own small businesses, who have sweated a payroll and taken risk and run up debt to try to survive, and now they're succeeding. Why are we punishing the very professionals and small businesses, whose success helps grow this economy? And finally, they already pay, these groups pay an outside-sized burden of our federal government. The top 1% of wage earners pay, I think, almost a quarter or more of all the federal income tax. The top 5% pay almost 2/3 of them. So heaping new taxes on them isn't the solution. Getting government spending under control, that's the solution.
Representative Brady, at what point does the national debt become a threat to the security of the U.S.? That's a tweet from Mr. Happy.
I think we're getting in the red zone right now with our debt. The way they compare the financial stability of the country is how much you owe compared to the size of your economy. Right now, we're at about 60%. We're in the yellow, the cautionary zone. And our debt, our annual deficits are worse than that. If you take the 5 countries in Europe that are in a debt crisis today, or at least facing a potential debt crisis, America's deficit is right in the middle. We're running the 3rd worst deficit on the globe. If we allow the spending to continue the way it is today, our debt will go up to nearly 100% of our entire economy. At that point, every economist tells us we're in trouble. The growth slows dramatically, and what we'll go from is sort of the go-go, steady growth of America, 3.5% over recent decades. We'll go to that sort of sluggish, slow European rate of 2%, really, which is actually more than we're doing today. If you're satisfied with the economy today, you'll be satisfied with it when our debt gets so large it consumes so much of our dollars and resources. So we're in the yellow zone right now. We will quickly get in the red zone if Congress doesn't change its ways.
Tallahassee, Florida. Phyllis on our Republican line. You're on with Congressman Kevin Brady. Please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Brady.
Hi, how are you, Phyllis?
I'm just fine. I have 2 questions,
Yes,
and they're not just my questions. There are a lot of people that I talk to. And one is why we give foreign aid to every country in the world, and I'd like to know how much we give to all the countries in the world. I mean a total. I would like to have some way of getting that information on C-SPAN so we could all know where our tax money does go in the form of foreign countries.
And your second question,
My
Phyllis?
second question is the IMF. I got a lot of literature from my congressman here in Tallahassee, and a very nice young man sent me quite a bit of literature, and I scanned through it. It made me kind of sick to my stomach because it dawned on me I don't know how much we've given them this year. Could you answer that question?
Yeah. Phyllis, who's your congressman?
Yeah,
Do you know
curious.
Mr. Boyd.
All right. Alan Boyd?
Wait, yes, Alan Boyd.
All right, we got your 2 questions. All right.
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to the first one. for sure. In fact, you may have been listening in on a conversation a number of us were having earlier this week, trying to figure out exactly how much money we do spend in foreign aid, because our budget, our government's so large, very difficult to know. We ought to know. We ought to know to the penny what we're spending in foreign aid. I think some of it's very well spent on security issues, on stabilization issues, on things that prevent bigger problems from occurring. I agree with those uses, but I think too often, way too often, we miss the mark on that. In fact, it reminds me, I come from a small business background, Chamber of Commerce executive, and businesses used to tell you that of their advertising dollar, 50% is wasted. They just don't know which 50%. I think foreign aid probably falls in that category. Too much is wasted. I'm not sure we know which part it is. And on the IMF, I have to check on what the funding would be for that organization. I do know the U.S. plays an outsized role as well in the IMF in their duties around the world. But I'd be glad, Phyllis, to check on that for you. But the initial question you asked, how much do we spend? Where does it go? I don't think Congress has a good grasp on that.
Betty Baker of Martha's Vineyard emails in, do you believe tax cuts should be given to those making more than $250,000? We've discussed that a little bit. If so, why? But define the line of demarcation between small business and big business.
On the first, clearly, I don't think we ought to increase taxes on anyone, especially professionals and small businesses, who, again, are key to our economic recovery. And on the second question, where do you define it?
Small business and big business. What's a small business?
Great question. The government generally defines it as small business as having 500 workers or less. I think most people look at small businesses as 25 workers or less. They often think of mom and pop with 10. I think mid-sized companies are those at 3 to 500 workers, I think, from a common sense standpoint. But from the government view and eligibility for programs, generally it is around 500 workers or so, which is bigger than I think most people tend to think of.
Jim Hines tweets in, when Bush was elected, the unemployment rate was well below 5%. Tax cuts did not work.
No, I'd have to disagree with that, especially given the recession that came immediately into President Bush's tenure. The attacks of 9/11 that destroyed more than 2 million American jobs almost overnight. I think every economist agrees that tax relief, especially not on businesses, on families, on capital gains and dividends, which helped jumpstart the stock market, all of that I think was very helpful. And I know this. Whatever this president is doing, our president is doing right now, isn't working. We are 14 months supposedly into this recovery. Our unemployment rate is higher than when the recession ended. We have 300,000 fewer jobs than when the recession ended. And 90% of Americans believe this economy is in bad shape and not going to get in good shape anytime soon. We certainly know what's not working, and I think the threat of higher taxes is going to do more harm.
Kevin Brady, you were in Congress when those tax cuts were passed in 2001. What was the thought process behind allowing them to expire?
It was the result of the Senate's 60 vote rule. And under the budget limitations at the time, to get past that 60 vote margin, there had to be limitations on the length and the size of those cuts. So it actually was a function of the Senate that did that. And also the result of all that is, you see staggered expiration dates, phase-ins, phase-outs, I think hugely complicating for people trying to manage their taxes. I don't think that's the way you ought to do, frankly, tax relief. I think the best way you jumpstart the economy at any point is give certainty and permanence on these issues. We ought to take a careful look at that as we go forward.
Greenbelt, Maryland. John, Democrat, please go ahead with your question.
Thanks. Thank you for having C-SPAN. I was just going to say that, I guess 2 points. First, it seems to me that the claim the representative made regarding the Bush administration balancing the budget for the first few years isn't quite correct. since I'm pretty sure every administration is spending the Social Security money to fund other projects, even though it's not supposed to be for Social Security. So running in surpluses, and we've been spending that to its limit, which, if you really add that into our deficit, equals a lot of deficit we have. But I was going to say that I think that Obama's plan to let the taxes expire is not a worse economic idea than the unprovoked war in Iraq, which I feel has cost us, besides troops, extremely, millions, billions of dollars, and at a time when we didn't really have the money, to go and chase that adventure down.
I think protecting our security is very expensive, and not just monetarily. It affects a lot of lives of soldiers who fight for us and don't return, as well as those who do. But clearly, we know the price of a terrorist attack in the United States. I don't think we had a choice, and I supported the president in this war. Continue to. In fact, this new president receives strong support from us Republicans in securing this nation. I think it is our #1 priority. It is expensive. That is true. But I think the price of not securing it is far greater.
Next call is from Atlanta. Nova on our independent line. Good morning to you. You're on with Congressman Kevin Brady.
Yes, good morning, C-SPAN. I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome.
Good morning to the representatives. I just wanted to say I'm happy to finally hear a representative come on and those Republicans to admit that there was waste. During the Bush administration, our surplus from the Clinton years was wasted. And now that President Obama is in office, he has to spend and raise taxes in order to get this economy back under control. And that is a truthful way. Now, where I come